The National Court of Spain has stated in a recent ruling that a written contract should be one of the main means of evidence to demonstrate that a service has been rendered. The importance of having such a document is to have sufficient support to take the corresponding tax effects when consideration is paid. The tax administration assessed a tax credit given that the taxpayer didn't prove that the service provided by its foreign associate was effectively rendered. Therefore, this criterion issued by the National Court could be seen as straight guidance that the primary evidence to demonstrate a service is a written agreement. In other words, it looks like the importance of this ruling is the position stated by a court denying tax effects on a provision of service given the lack of the legal document containing the agreement of the parties. However, in my view, this is not an accurate outcome of the analysis of the ruling of the Audiencia Nacional or National Court of Spain. If you take a look at the ruling, you will realize that the absence of a written contract was just one of the elements considered by the court to confirm the assessment of the tax authority. The taxpayer affirmed having an executed contract, but the reason for not presenting the agreement during the trial was simply because they didn't find it. It was lost. The argument was weak, given that broadly, a contract is signed, executed, and kept in written form by both parties involved in the arrangement. Hence, it's hard to believe that both parties have lost their copies. Of course, this was a relevant fact taken into account by the court, but it wasn't the only one to define the ruling. Among other elements, the court concluded that the invoices that the taxpayer provided had general descriptions that didn't generate certainty about the provision of the related service. Moreover, there was no evidence of any kind regarding the provision of the service further than the argument of the taxpayer during the process, but nothing that could back up such declaration. Finally, the taxpayer tried to demonstrate that the service was provided in reality, showing a diversity of emails between officers of the parties involved in the agreement. Still, the court again dismissed the evidence, given that the objective of the service was not based on communication by email between the provider and the beneficiary of the service. Therefore, the court didn't found its decision only upon the lack of the contract, but on a series of documents and evidence that didn't demonstrate that the service was effectively provided. It's true that the written agreement could have changed the sense of the ruling, but it's unlikely due to in the ruling, the court never expressed that the contract could have such relevance to generate certainty on the provision of service. Our clients, many of them multinationals, should give proper attention to these details when documenting low-risk operations, like a back office or administrative support, because even the simplest intercompany operation deserves proper evidence. MFN is the acronym for Most Favored Nation, a figure used in international taxation through double tax agreements with its origin in trading treaties. The MFN clause has been used for many years in international trading, and its principle firstly recognized by the World Trade Organization before the principle was applied in double tax treaties. In the international tax arena, the MFN or Most Favored Nation concept means the right of treaty partners in a DTA to have access to a more favorable treatment provided by the other contracting state to a third state in the respective DTA between these two other states. In other words, if a country gives better treatment to another country on a particular subject under a given agreement than the treatment provided in a DTA between that country and another one, the first country must treat other parties to the agreement equally regarding that subject. The MFN principle is based on the reasoning that any favor offered to one country must be offered to all. The tax agency in India has issued a circular, which means an official document, trying to explain how to use and interpret the MFN clause in treaties where India is a party, with a basic requirement that all countries involved in an MFN clause must be members of the OECD. One of the main issues that has generated controversy is to define if the countries involved in an MFN clause should be part of the OECD before granting a more favorable treatment in another DTA, and if that DTA should be agreed before India has signed or executed a treaty with a third party that includes an MFN clause. The India Tax Agency has finally tried to clarify the application of an MFN clause incorporated in a DTA where India is one of the parties. The authorities define that to have access to an MFN right, the DTA with the first country that contains such clause should be entered into force or be signed before the DTA with the third country has been signed or is in effect. Further, the third country must be an OECD member when signing the DTA with India. Of course, the DTA with the third party must have better treatment than that stated in the DTA between India and the first country about the same subject. Finally, and something relevant to note, is that India has determined as a compulsory requirement that the MFN will not enter into effect if India has not issued a separate notification to this effect. I think this circular is a step forward to clarify the use and interpretation of the MFN clauses set out in the DTAs where India is a partner, and further, it could be a guidance to clarify DTAs where India is not a signing party. However, the separate notification established by the Indian government goes beyond what international taxation, DTAs, and their protocols determine. I trust these videos help find new ideas to share with other Kreston colleagues and clients in the benefit of all. I am Guillermo Narvaez, Technical Tax Director of the Kreston Global Tax Group, and I'll see you in the next edition. Meanwhile, stay safe.